Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the moment we've all been waiting for. Oh, my God. And here it is. Yes, the newest, latest Furtwängler box, billed as the complete Furtwängler on record, which it most assuredly is not. So one of the things we need to do initially is see how this latest box differs from so many of the previous boxes. I have some of them sitting here, and oh my goodness. Well, we're going to look at them just because I have a point that we need to make as we go through this whole thing. First of all, the proximate, this is on Warner, right? Which means it's going to feature mostly EMI / now Warner recordings, but also it has some Deutsche Grammophon recordings for reasons we'll go into in a moment. The last proximate Warner / EMI Furtwängler box was this one. This was called Furtwängler The Great EMI Recordings, which really should have just been called Furtwängler Every Scrap We Could Find and Stick in a Box Recordings, because whether it's great or not great, they couldn't care less, and many of them are truly not great. Anyway, this was a 21 CD set, whereas this is 55, although one of them is in like a memory interview type thingy, but musically it's like 54. So then there's that box. So in addition to that box, one of the things we should look at was, let's see here. Oh my goodness. This box. Now this is the old Deutsche Grammophon, Japanese Deutsche Grammophon, whatever, the old Furtwängler, Japanese, I don't even say all these German things are twisting my tongue. The old Deutsche Grammophon, Japanese Furtwängler edition. Yes, there it is. And here they all are. And it looks like a big, impressive box because they're all in jewel cases. But if you take them out of jewel cases, then what you can do is stuff them all into something like this, which was the last Deutsche Grammophon Furtwängler box, containing, wait a minute, how many discs is that? Is this 34? Basically, 33, 34, plus a DVD of Don Giovanni. So that's actually more in here, because it has the Decca stuff, which I just reviewed at a separate Eloquence issue. Most of it's miserable, as that. So there's that one. Then, of course, we all need to deal with, there are a million smaller boxes that Deutsche Grammophon has issued. Here's a typical example. There's this one, live recordings, 1944 to 53, none of which are going to be in here for the most part, I think. I mean, if you think I'm going to go through and cross-check this, you're out of your mind. Anyway, so there's those things. Then, of course, we have the Nazi recordings, euphemistically called the wartime recordings. There was this, remember Tara did tons and tons and tons of Furtwängler, not just the Nazi stuff, but some of the other stuff. But then, of course, realizing there was money to be made, the Berlin Philharmonic got into the act and released this shameless piece of money-grubbing, historical, shameful, I don't know what this is. They call these the radio recordings, 1939 to 1945. They just as well call them the Hitler recordings, because the Berlin Philharmonic was an organ of the Nazi government at that point, and here they are. It's so nice that they've finally decided to capitalize on that legacy. And last, but certainly not least, there was this gesunte monstrosity here, the 107 CD Furtwängler Das Vermächtnis, the legacy. It's a Vermächtnis as opposed to an Unmächtnis or an Urmächtnis or just a plain Mächtnis. This got famous. This is like an indie piratey label where they could do all this stuff on the cheap. And this was the box that was really inexpensive, but it's famous because it's the one that Angela Merkel gave to the Pope. And, in case you're wondering, the doctrine of papal infallibility does not extend to his taste in music. or performers. So we don't have to worry about that. As far as matters of faith and dogma, I have nothing to say about it, and everyone will deal with that as necessary. But this is the Vermächtnis box, 107 fun-filled CDs. So given the fact that that has 107 CDs and this has 55, it's obviously not the complete Furtwängler on disc. So what this thing purports to be, let us be clear, is the complete Furtwängler that he theoretically approved to release on record, or thought about releasing on record but didn't before he died, or some other stuff that they could dig up that he never approved to be released on record. And that's basically what this is. And we're going to go through it, disc by disc, to see how good or wretched some of it is. Now, as you can see, because there are really hundreds of Furtwängler CDs out there of many, many performances, anything that got recorded, basically, that got taped, no matter how bad the sound, no matter who taped it, whether it was an official broadcast or a label of some kind, or some schmo in the orchestra with a microphone under his coat, whatever it was, that is what we're going to get. Mind you, none of these things, well, I didn't look at the 107 disc thing, but remember, there are 2 ring cycles. They're both done in Italy, one at La Scala, one with Italian radio. Neither of those are in here. And even though one was an official recording, and Furtwängler wanted the radio performance to be released at least, I don't think he was aware of the La Scala pirate taping. But it's just an unbelievable mess, his legacy, with all kinds of duplication, crazy duplication of discs, of labels, of repertoire. It's all everywhere. It's all over the place. So before you take the plunge, you sort of need to know what you're getting. And I have no advice about that, because at all times, Furtwängler was incredibly variable. And no one box, I think, has the best of his stuff. And even the best of his stuff is a matter of taste, some of it. But we're going to go through this, and we're going to see what's in here. And it's a nice box. It slides out conveniently. There you go. And first thing I want to talk about is the sound. Because Furtwängler notably disliked making recordings. He was notably bad at it. Some of his studio recordings are marvelous. He did pull himself together for a few of them, and some of them are in here. We'll get to them when we talk about them. But by and large, he was quite uncomfortable in the recording studio. And that's fair. That's fair. It's okay. But if that's true, then let's just confess that given the fact that he was variable, whether he was live or in the studio, the fact that he tended to be less good in the studio means that a lot of these things are not going to be the best of him. And they aren't. They truly are not. So that's said. Let's be clear about that. Second of all, for someone who was uncomfortable in the studio, even for his own day, he tended to get lousy sound. There are some conductors who really care about what their records sound like, and some who just don't. And Furtwängler was a don't. He seemed to be dissatisfied with everything involving technology, because, as we discussed in my little chat about his philosophy, he thought the entire modern world was horrible and evil. And so he didn't really have much patience for it, and didn't seem to take much interest in making sure that whatever product he released was of the highest quality. And that was his fault. That was just his fault, and the engineers and whatnot. Who would want to deal with that? So that's another sort of fact that we need to deal with. Now, I'm not going to pull these out one disc at a time, because it's easier to go through the booklet. It really is. You get the same stuff. You do get the things here on the back of each disc, but I think it's easier to go through the booklet and talk about what's in here. Now, there's some very early Polydor recordings and things like that. I think the earliest performance here is from, 1927, somewhere around there. And or 1926, it looks like, Weber's Der Freischütz Overture. And then And then he switched eventually to a polydor or polychrome or polyester, whatever it was called. It eventually became Deutsche Grammophon, but he was also doing things for EMI at that time, which was HMV. See what I mean? See just what an annoyance this whole thing is, keeping track of this? Let's talk about the discs. Disc 1. You've got Der Freischütz, you have Beethoven's Fifth from 1927, which sounds about like you would expect Beethoven's Fifth to sound like from 1927. Fortunately, there are many later Furtwängler Beethoven's Fifth. And, you know, the way we keep track of Furtwängler Beethoven's Fifth is how many actual notes the opening motive, which theoretically only has 4, actually has in his performances. There's the famous 7-note da-da-da-da-da-da-dum, and the 6-note one, and the 5-note one, and even a 3-note one. You get to pick, because he never managed to get the orchestra to come in and only play 4 notes. But that's okay. He was always a terrific performer of Beethoven's Fifth. He really was. I mean, they're very, very exciting performances for the most part. Grim and determined and heroic by turn. But why would you want to listen to the one from 1927, which sounds just awful? Oh, let's talk about sound. Before we get too far into this, everyone who's heard this set will tell you correctly that the masterings it's all remastered, and that the sound is better than any of the other commercially available releases of the same repertoire, of which there are countless, as we know. And that's true. It has been quite wonderfully remastered. But, and this is a very, very big but, it doesn't matter. Shit sound is shit sound. And it doesn't matter how you remaster it. It may sound marginally better, tiny bit, little bit better. But if it was bad to begin with, it's going to be bad. And so it remains bad. If you don't like dim-sounding historical recordings, you are not going to like marginally improved dim-sounding historical recordings. And I say that in all fairness. I know there are people who love this stuff. I'm not one of them. I have to be honest. I don't believe there's anything historical that hasn't been made in decent sound by somebody else or the same guy, and that you can enjoy without having to make crazy allowances for the defects and deficiencies in the engineering of the period. And that's just how I feel about it. And I do believe that that's actually a fact that you can demonstrate through listening, quite simply, actually. So let's be clear about that. And one of the things that is fascinating to me about the Furtwängler legacy is that compared to most other conductors, he kind of operates in reverse. What I mean by that is, for example, most conductors, they do a recording of something, it's very, very good. And if they're really, really great from their studio recordings, you want to go listen to their live stuff to hear if the live stuff is actually better than the studio stuff, because the studio stuff is so fabulous. And sometimes it is. Sometimes you can get a live recording that's even better. Furtwängler is just the opposite. His studio stuff largely sucks, and so you go to the live stuff so you can try and get a good version of something that sounded awful in the studio. Now, why would you want to go and do that at all? Why would we believe that his live recordings are so much more wonderful than his studio ones when the studio ones aren't too good to begin with? Part of the reason is that he has a historical reputation for being such a great conductor. A truly great conductor. And the records don't bear that out for the most part, whether they're live or in the studio. They're largely sloppy, bad-sounding approximations of what a great performance could be. Now, in those few examples where we do get a great performance, where everything goes right, we can confess they are marvelous, absolutely marvelous. But does that justify you, the listener, running around acquiring all of these boxes in the hopes of getting one partially decent sounding performance that mostly goes right? That's something you have to decide for yourself. And I would never urge you to do that, not with anybody. The other issue, and the other reason that his reputation is so exalted, and I've always felt this way about it, is because he did the German standard rep. And we have this this prejudice or bias that says the German standard rep, Beethoven and Brahms and those people are the greatest, and Wagner are the greatest composers that ever lived. Therefore, the composers that play that music well, or the conductors, are the greatest conductors that ever lived. I think that's complete bullshit. I really do. I actually get angry at that position because I am not a Germanophile in terms of repertoire. I love that music. I think that music is great. I do not think it's greater than the music of any place else. That is the great masterpieces of Russia or Italy or France or England or the United States or Scandinavia or Brazil. I mean, greatness is greatness, and it doesn't matter where it comes from. So the fact that he did German repertoire and focused on that almost exclusively is not, for me, an automatic guarantor of his superiority. And that's something I also have to toss out there, because I know that there are a lot of you who may or may not love the German repertoire. You may love the French repertoire more. And if that's the case, you're not going to find these sort of, quasi-transcendental approximations of German repertoire of unparalleled greatness as opposed to a conductor who could do really great German repertoire and really great something else. So I think that's something that we need to consider too. He was not a conductor of great versatility. He was not a conductor with a wide range of interests. And that was just who he was. He had a very, very narrow musical focus. And so within that focus, he could be astonishing. He could be, and some of that's in here. So let's see what it is. With all that said, let's now go back. So we have this horrible 1927 Beethoven Fifth, horrible sonically. It's not a bad performance. Mendelssohn's A Midsummer Night's Dream, Bach Orchestral Suite No. 3, a couple Schubert Rosamund things. These are all with the Berlin Philharmonic. And then we've got Wagner, Lohengrin, Act 1 Prelude, the Tristan and Isolde Prelude and Liebestod. That's we're all the way up to, where are we up to? 1930. Ooh, boy. The Schubert Rosamunde Overture, Till Eulenspiegel's Merry Pranks, plus 8 minutes of rehearsal, which is interesting because Furtwängler never did Strauss very well. He didn't really get along with him. I think it's because, to be honest with you, Strauss was totally the opposite temperamentally from Furtwängler as a conductor and as a composer. Furtwängler was obsessed with the spiritual wholeness and unique oneness and transcendental magnificence of German music. And he was into all of that Geist and Seele stuff that they were talking about back at the turn of the 20th century. Strauss was completely the opposite. He was a Nietzschean atheist, a less spiritual composer. It would be impossible to imagine. And of course, his music reflects that. And so it's not surprising that Furtwängler would not have found it terribly congenial. And so there we have Till Eulenspiegel from 1930. Then we've got more Mendelssohn, Hebrides, Fingal's Cave, plus a rehearsal, As If It Matters, and then the Damnation of Faust Hungarian March, and One Slavonic Dance, and part of the Brandenburg Concerto No. 3. No, it's the whole thing. Ugh, it's horrible. Rossini's Gazzaladra, a couple Brahms Hungarian dances. I mean, this is what they did back in those days, in the days of early electrical recordings in 78. So I am not going to spend a lot more time going through these initial discs because they are simply what they are, little bits of things. Now, with that said, there's a lot of very good playing in these recordings of little bits of things, to the extent you can tell. I mean, Furtwängler was not always slovenly. He became worse as he got older, but basically, there is some really good playing. It shows that he was quite capable of pulling himself together and doing things like, playing in rhythm and with good, clean attacks and all of those basics that we have come to expect in our orchestral performances. So it was possible and doable, and he did it, and he did it often. Let's be fair. The live recordings, anything could happen, and in the studio recordings, a little fewer things sometimes happened. But anyway, then we get to CD5. See how quickly this is going? When we get to the operas, it'll speed up. We have the ninth. Now, the 1937 stuff, first of all, sounds just terrible. Really, really terrible. It sounds just awful. So you've got this thing, and it just sounds like hell. Completely awful. Now we have some of Die Valkyra Act Three with Kirsten Flagstad and those people. Now, Furtwängler's Wagner was always terrific. It was just terrific. And you go for the singers. That's what you do. You go for the singers. So this is Kirsten Flagstad and Maria Müller and Rudolf Böckelmann as Wotan, and a bunch of very loud Valkyries. And again, the sound is, but you put up with it for the singing, because in historical recordings, generally, the singers are reproduced. I mean, you hear the voices and you don't care about the orchestra. And if you don't care about the orchestra, then the voices come through, you'll be happy. I mean, it's okay. You'll get through it. Next, excerpts from this is the Covent Garden Götterdämmerung, or part of it. Let me see. This is with the London Philharmonic, and it's with the Royal Chorus of the Royal Opera. Yeah, and it's with Kirsten Flagstad and Loritz Melchior and Margareta Klose. I mean, great singing, fabulous singing. And you've got in here, let's see, Götterdämmerung. You've got part of the prologue and part of Act Two, and the immolation scene is here somewhere. I think when she gets immolated. Yes, here is Grana Mein Ross with Kirsten Flagstad. Whoa, baby! Again, horrible sound. You don't really hear the orchestra very well, but the singing is great, and the conducting is exciting as hell. It really is. Just fantastically dramatic, thrilling conducting. So you can detect it. You can tell whether you'll be comfortable listening to it. Again, that's up to you. But it's pretty splendid. Oh, look, Beethoven's Fifth from 1937. Who cares? Then we have Tristan and Isolde, the Prelude and Liebestod from 1938, and Parsifal Prelude and Good Friday Music, also from 1938. Again, the sonics are really scruffy. They sound better than they have in any other version I've heard, clearer and more open, but also somewhat shrill in places and scrappy. I don't know. Again, very, very well done. Very well done. Then we have Tchaikovsky Pathétique. Some people like this Pathétique. It's not very good. Truly not very good. It gets worse as it goes, basically. And although, I was disappointed with the remastering of this, actually. Yeah, the sound is more open, particularly at the beginning of the first movement and all that. It starts when the music is quiet. It sounds quite lovely. But as soon as the full orchestra comes in and it heats up, it starts to get lousy, and there seems to be some sort of patina of scruffedness around the high violins, which is quite unpleasant. And there's nothing you can do about it. I've heard masterings of this performance, including the one on Naxos, which sound considerably smoother, probably because they're more thoroughly processed. So you get a more open, natural sonority here, but you also have more noise and I think more distracting distortion and other stuff. So, and it's not a great Pathétique. So now we get, the slow movement of Furtwängler's own Symphonic Concerto for Piano and Orchestra. This is also 1939, and the Cavatina from Beethoven's String Quartet number 13. And, the Adagio of the Seventh Symphony by Anton Bruckner. The only movement he did from it. And then we get, Gluck, the Alceste Overture. The pianist is Edwin Fischer. That's a famous recording. 11 minutes of turgid muck. It's a horrible piece, his Symphonic Concerto. And then, we're still in now we're up to 43. Yes, isn't this exciting? And with some of these, and this is the Vienna Philharmonic. You've got the Brahms Haydn variations, which aren't bad. He always did really good Haydn variations, too. And the Beethoven Pastoral Symphony. And I have to say, Beethoven's Pastoral Symphony was not a Furtwängler specialty. He was not happy when Beethoven was happy. He was happy when Beethoven was miserable. And like in the Funeral March of the Eroica, or the Fifth, or the Ninth. I don't know. I just find his pastoral to be terribly, terribly heavy. Heavy and thick and rather unsmiling. And it always was. It never got better. And we've got the Violin Concerto with Yehudi Manuin, which is quite good, from 47. Finally, we're getting into the late 40s, where things started to sound a little better. And we have an Eroica with an extra first side of the funeral march because they had it sitting around under a chair or something, and the Coriolan Overture, which is very slow and very dull. And I like Furtwängler's Eroica. It was always a good one. But again, you're going to have to figure out which one you want. He did better ones at other points. Oh, dear. All right. And then we've got, let's see. Oh, a very good, like my colleague Jed Disler, who reviewed this box for ClassicsToday.com quite fairly, in my opinion, pointed out the excellence of this recording of Mozart's Grand Partita, which is wonderful with the Vienna Philharmonic winds. It's marvelous. Absolutely first class. Beautiful, beautiful performance. Then we got Brahms first with the Vienna Phil. Well, everybody knows that the great Brahms one by Furtwängler was the NDR one. And I also like his Berlin one. This is the Vienna one. The later Berlin one, I think that one's very good too, but that's live, so it's not in here. See? All right, then you get Brahms 2, and then we have some alternate takes from Brahms 2. This was the London Philharmonic Decca one, which isn't very good, and the alternate takes don't help you. I mean, it's nice that they give you alternate takes, but if it's not a good performance to begin with, why do you want to hear not good alternate takes? And also, frankly, this every scrap stuff, it's overvaluing what this is. Do we really believe that his second thoughts and third thoughts and scraps and remakes, and it's that important? I mean, is it really that goddamn important that we need to hear in a not good performance to begin with? I mean, I get it. There's a completeness thing. I get the feeling that half of this stuff is no longer for the enjoyment of listening, the thrill of listening to a complete symphony by somebody. It's only as an academic exercise for future generations, for someone wanting to write a thesis on Furtwängler's Brahms Second with the London Philharmonic, be able to compare all the takes and generate reams of useless verbiage that can go into an archive somewhere, never to be seen again. I have a feeling, actually, that Furtwängler would have been horrified by the very notion, because he was obsessed with ideas of organic wholeness and unity and coherence and all those things. He would never have wanted people to listen to his second thoughts or to dissect a performance the way that some of these things are letting us do. I know that sounds like I'm complaining and being, kvetchy and altercockerish, as they say, but, because they're giving us all of this stuff, and I guess that's a good thing, but I don't know. I don't think it's a good thing from a musical point of view. Somehow the music is getting lost. And you see that Furtwängler may have had a point about his suspicion of what the technology can be used for. What matters is what you do with it, All right. So then we have Wagner, Götterdämmerung. Oh, here's the immolation scene. The whole immolation scene. Is this the one with... Oh, this is the one with Flagstad, the Philharmonia from 48. Yes, it's very, very exciting. And we've got, let's see, the Hebrides Overture and Mozart's G minor, which he usually did pretty well. He wasn't really a Mozart conductor other than Don Giovanni, other than the evil stuff. But this is G minor, so it's quasi-evil. It's okay. Wagner, Siegfried Idyll, Tannhäuser Overture, all the Wagner's good. Let me just say that, and then we don't have to talk about it anymore. And all of his Brahms Haydn variations are very good. And here's another one from 1949. And let's see, it's more Brahms, Hungarian dances, little bits, with the Vienna Philharmonic, CD 21. Let's do CD 21. Brahms, Violin Concerto with Johann Manuin, again, with Lucerne Festival Orchestra. Not the best Brahms. Manuin's not so hot in here, frankly. I don't think it's Furtwängler's fault. Furtwängler was a good accompanist, a sensitive accompanist. I witnessed his wonderful opera recordings and some of his concerto recordings. The Bartok Violin Concerto with Manuin, which was excellent. He was a very, very sensitive, but the soloists are the soloists. So, let's see, Beethoven 7 and Schubert's Unfinished. He always did a good Unfinished. I like his Unfinisheds. I mean, that's fun. Strauss, Death and Transfiguration. Well, it's spiritual. You'd think Furtwängler would do it well? No, it doesn't have any oomph. It doesn't have any transfigured anything in it. Probably because Strauss was faking it, and Furtwängler was too sincere to fake it. Anyway, let's see. Beethoven 4th, that's fine. Too slow, by the way. Again, happy Beethoven, slow and heavy and thick. Not the best. Let's see, then there's more Wagner, Weber, Schubert. Oh, God, it's just the same stuff over and over and over. Oh, Mozart, some Wilma Lipp singing The Queen of the Night, and Schubert, Rosamunde, oh God, Tchaikovsky 4. As, again, my colleague Jed pointed out, first two movements are fabulous, last two, ugh. You know, as soon as you have to get into the pizzicato scherzo, where it requires precision and piquancy and subtleties of balance, and it relies on a keen appreciation of color and sonority, Furtwängler is boop, out the window. Cherubini, Anacreon Overture. Well, we certainly need that. And Haydn's Surprise Symphony. I find Furtwängler's Haydn to be completely humorless for the most part. His 88th, of course, is in here. It's famous because the DG stuff that was studio is also in here, by the way. They licensed it from Deutsche Grammophon, which makes choosing things even more fun, given the other boxes we just looked at, right? But here's Haydn's 94, which is humorless. The Moldau, this is with the Vienna Phil, which is also kind of heavy and flat-footed. And Schumann's Manfred Overture, which isn't bad. And the Merry Wives of Windsor up. Then we get Beethoven's Emperor with Edwin Fischer. Famous recording. Very, very good. Lovely to hear. Mendelssohn's Violin Concerto, again, with Yehudi Manuin. It's better than his Brahms. Let's put it that way. I think you could also smile a little bit more. Then we get, here we have the famous Bayreuth performance of
the Ninth.
Isn't that just marvelous? Absolutely marvelous. I wish it were more marvelous. I find it to be rather sloppy. The slow movement is completely static. The woodwind intonation is miserable. The finale has some incredibly scruffy playing and singing. The chorus might as well have been somewhere other than Bayreuth. Someone left them in Berlin. I don't know. And so it's just not Furtwängler's best in that particular work. Then we've got Schubert. Ooh, Schubert's great C major. This is with Berlin. Yeah, oh, this is great. Fabulous performance. Absolutely fabulous. From 51, it's marvelous. One of the great Schubert ninths. And then we have Furtwängler's own Second Symphony. Now, I have always regarded Furtwängler's Second, I have no hesitation to say, as a minor masterpiece. I think of its kind and of its type, it's absolutely splendid. And this he did a live one that was on Orfeo, and Daniel Barenboim recorded it very excitingly. Frankly, the best version is Barenboim's because you simply hear everything. But this is not bad sounding, and it's a good piece. It's really a good piece. And for somebody, famous as like an Adagio conductor, the slow movement is actually rather lovely and lyrical and not heavy duty at all. The finale is heavy duty. It's a big fugal thing and whatnot, and you don't hear the tam-tam at all, which is terrible. It has a tam-tam. I have the score, actually. And, Furtwängler was a vibrato guy. He wrote vibrato under his string parts periodically, which tells us what he expected players to do and what they actually did back in the day. And then here's the Haydn 88, which some people love. I mean, it's a very good interpretation of what it is, but I find it to be, again, just a little bit on the not fun side. And let's see. Then we have lots more Wagner and the famous Mahler Songs of a Wayfarer with Fischer-Dieskau, which is absolutely terrific. And let's see here. More Beethoven, First Symphony, and then, of course, the Pastoral again, which is, I think, even slower and heavier. No, it's not slower and heavier. It's exactly the same. Just as slow and heavy as it was last time. And we get his Vienna 1952 Eroica. And I mean, the best Eroica everybody knows was the wartime one. Sorry. And another Beethoven 4, which is just as heavy and sort of unsmiling as the last one. And the Tannhäuser Overture, which is pretty terrific. And here's the Philharmonia Beethoven Violin Concerto with Manuin, which is really good. Really good. Better than the 40s one with Lucerne Festival, because you've got the Philharmonia. And the two Romances. That's really a beautiful record. It first came out on Testament. I think EMI didn't even know they had it for a while, but it's really, really good. And the Schumann Fourth. Schumann Fourth is fabulous. That's a famous studio recording where everything went right. It's terrific. The Franck D minor with Vienna Phil, horrible. Oh, just awful. This was one of those. This was the one that was in the Decca box, maybe. I don't know. It was all. He did it a couple times. It was horrible both times. Slow and thick and heavy and completely unidiomatic and totally lacking in suppleness. It's just stuck in the mud is what it is. That's what it is. stuck in the mud. Then here's the Bartok Second Violin Concerto with Yuri Manuin. Terrific. And another Beethoven Fifth from 54. Why not? Maybe this is the one with 9 notes to the 4-note motive. It's good. It's fine. It's a Furtwängler Beethoven Fifth. And then we've got some more Wagner, some Götterdämmerung excerpts, and Strauss Don Juan. Ugh, absolutely a mess. And another Till Eulenspiegel, which is slowed down by a minute and a bit since his last one from the 1920s or 30s or whatever. It's no better. And Les Preludes. Well, that's fun. And some more Wagner and Weber and Gluck. You know, the usual people. Beethoven Leonore Overture number 2. Ugh. Not very exciting and not very together. Not really very together at all. Then we have, oh yes, the St. Matthew Passion, which was supposedly slated to be released but was never released. It's abridged, thank God, and it's just awful. It's just heavy and boring and thick and glutinous. And it's amazing how the difference with Klemperer, you know, who also was famous for his slow St. Matthew Passion, which is transcendental and fabulous and intense and gaunt and grim and almost expressionistically intense. This is just bleh, flabby and boring. Then we have Tristan, the famous Tristan, the studio recording with the Philharmonia, which is magnificent, with Kirsten Flagstad, except for Elizabeth Schwarzkopf doing the high Cs. It's really, really, really terrific. It's the best, probably, representation of Wagner that Furtwängler did. Although he was concerned that some of it was a little too slow, he was happy with the sonics, as well he should have been. It sounds lovely, and so wonderful. Then we've got Fidelio, and the Fidelio is very good too, because Furtwängler was good at this stuff. It's with Martha Myrtle, who was always a little, and Wolfgang Wingassen, you know, and Otto Edelmann is Pizarro, and Gottlob Frick is Rocco. He's terrific. And Sena Urinat is Marcelina. It's a very, very strong cast, and it's a very good Fidelio. So that's worth hearing. And we get the complete Valkyra. Well, here Martha Myrtle is not as in good shape, as good a shape as she is in the Fidelio, but these are very well-known performances. I mean, it's a complete Valkyra with Furtwängler in the best sound we'll ever hear from him. So it's important for him. And other than that, it's with Leni Rieseneck as, you know, the greatest Sieglinde of all time, and Ludwig Sudhaus is Sigmund, and Gottlob Frick is the world's creepiest Hunding. So it's all great. It's good to have. It's really good to have if you don't mind a rather shaky Brunhilde. But to hear Furtwängler's way with it, since we're not going to get the complete ring cycles in here, is good to have. And then we have CD 54. See, we're already at CD 54. Aren't you excited? The previously unissued Schubert Unfinished. This consists of 11 minutes and 46 seconds of first movement, and then 48 minutes of hall ambience, and then 12 minutes and 12 seconds of the second movement. I mean, it's okay. It's not as good as the other ones that are on here. I think can we talk between the two of us, 3 of us, hundreds of us, however many of us there are? What this set shows is just how inconsistent he was. In those pieces where he's doing the same music, yes, the conception doesn't change very much. It really doesn't. And if he had a good conception, it's a good conception. But the results he gets vary, fairly considerably from one performance to the next. And that's just the way he was. You never knew what you were going to get, which is frustrating. And you also get, let's see, the Kaiser Waltz and Siegfried's Funeral March and 2 more Rosamund things for like the 400th time on here. I think there are 4 or 5 Rosamund things on here. One movement from the Tchaikovsky Serenade. And then a track 9 called Various. And it says tuning, buzzers, and false starts. And that's 14 CDs all by itself. I'm just kidding. It's 4 minutes and 38 seconds of tuning, buzzers, and false starts. Do we really need that? Do we? Honestly? And then there's the Furtwängler memoir. And that's the box. That's the box. And as you can tell from this little chat, I am not someone who's going to say that you should sit through this stuff. Do I recommend this? Well, most of the things, the DG stuff you could still get on DG. And most of these pieces Furtwängler did as well, if not better, elsewhere, if you want Furtwängler. And I just got to tell you, look at all these boxes. Look at all this stuff here. Look at the effort that goes in to trying to find a really great, acceptable performance based on the rumor that this man was the greatest conductor of the 20th century. I submit to you that anybody deserving of that appellation should not require so much work to justify it. We should be able to pull out a typical example and say, yes, he was one of the greatest conductors of the 20th century. But if you have to go and get 175 CDs and 52 remasterings of the same performance and pull your hair out on 35 different labels, all looking for one decent performance of a repertory standard in reasonable sound, where you can get dozens of fabulous performances of that repertory standard in very good sound, then I would submit that this is not one of the great conductors of the 20th century, number one. And number two, that what people are listening to is not Beethoven and not Mozart and not Wagner and not Bruckner or Brahms. They're listening to Furtwängler. And what they're hearing is what they want to hear. They're hearing something which is in their head as a model of what greatness could be, or striving, or the effort at transcendence, or soulfulosity, or something like that they want and they need. And they have every right to want it and need it and look for it. But the musical experience of that composer is, in my view, a secondary consideration. And I do not think Furtwängler is that interesting of a person, of an interpreter, of a talent to justify the effort where his performances are not the great ones. The great ones I accept. Greatness is its own justification, always. And there were times when he was great, but they were intermittent. And they are extremely intermittent here. So be forewarned, and it's your money. Spend it as you please. Either way, let's all keep on listening. Take care, folks. Thanks for joining me.